What's going on, guys? This is the NBA. This is the NBA. This is the NBA draft tonight. This is the Dynasty edition of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, brought to you by Bird Dog Shorts. Dominate summer with an amazing pair of shorts with free Yeti-style tumbler when you order at birddogs.com/pool. That's birddogs.com/pool. We're going to talk about some fantasy football breakouts, but first I want to introduce the guest, Marcas Grant. Thanks for coming on, sir.
Yeah, man. I was just going to say that for me, Victor Wembanyama is the 1.01 in, I don't know, is Dynasty basketball a thing? I'd imagine it has to be, right?
It is. I'm not in there yet. I'm sure eventually I'll get into that, but yeah, he's got to be the 101.
Has to be. Absolutely.
he's the 101 in the draft. You match him up with Pop. It's good to go. Well, please.
By the way, congrats to the guy who bet $60,000 to win 300. Did you? I don't know if you saw this.
No.
A guy bet $60,000 that Wembanyama would be the number one pick in the draft, and it paid off 300.
That's a lot of risk for a little bit of reward. Make sure you give my guy Marcus a follow. Marcus, you've always been, really easy to work. Whenever we reach out and ask you to come on, and then last year at the Expo. Just hanging out with everybody. Really appreciate that, and love to see what you guys are doing over there. Love seeing Laquan on there with you as well.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, he came over last summer as a researcher, moved out from Jersey, moved his whole family out, and brought him out to Los Angeles. Has been doing research for us for the last year, and I've been trying to just ease him in, right? Just sort of, if I could just very quietly pry him away from the research team and bring him over fully to the fantasy side, that would be great. But in the meantime, we try to just slide him into the pod where we can.
Well, and I love the stuff you're doing with Dynasty, making it, a little bit more mainstream, and the videos are amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, nice. I have to get back on my TikTok grind again. I was doing it for a while. I kind of fell off. I have some things cooking, and so I think by me saying it out loud here, that's my motivation to actually finish them. I can't just tell everybody and tease it and then not do it. So I will say it out loud. I have some things cooking for TikTok, and hopefully I will, get off my ass and actually get them.
Well, if you guys don't follow him on TikTok, follow him on TikTok and then just give him a, hey, where's the video?
Where's the video? Right. Just harass me until I get it done.
As always, housekeeping. Make sure you guys, send us your questions, subscribe. We got the Discord channel. And as always, hit that subscriber button from Jakey. So first question, Marcus, super serious question. If you were in a Dynasty league and your league was a Nintendo league, what would your team name be?
I guess I'd have to, officially workshop it a little bit, but it would be something about Tecmo Bowl Jackson, Tecmo Bowl Bo Jackson, Tecmo Bowl Jackson. I don't know, but I know that everybody of a certain age talks about how amazing Michael Vick was on Madden, and it's absolutely true. But before that, the most dominant video game football player of all time was Bo Jackson with the Raiders. If you just handed him the ball, it was pretty much a wrap. You were going to the house every time you got it. The only thing about Bo in that game was that he couldn't really catch the football, but it didn't matter because you also had Marcus Allen in that backfield, and he could catch the ball really well. So, having Bo Jackson was the ultimate cheat code in Tecmo Bowl back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, if you could find a way to get Bo Jackson on offense and Lawrence Taylor on defense, you would have been unstoppable. Well, yeah, Tecmo Bowl is definitely where it's at. We're here to talk about breakouts. And for breakouts, for me, the definition of a breakout is really someone that's not done it before. You can use markers like, 200 fantasy points or 1,000 yards. Every position's a little bit different. your tight ends and quarterbacks, someone that has not finished in the top 12 that you expect to finish inside the top 12. Marcus, did I miss anything, or what's your definition of breakout?
I think those work. I also have heard people say, finishing as, a top 10 or top 12 player at their relative position, basically finishing as like, say an RB1 or a wide receiver one, something like that. I do think we need to come to a consensus definition of what a breakout is, though, right? I mean, we all want to talk about it, and we all do shows or write columns about breakout players. But we're all sort of working with different metrics. So we need to, plant a flag and be like, hey, you are not a breakout player until you have done X, Y, and Z. And then it makes it easier for us to talk. And then once we get that done, we can work on sleepers again, because that's a whole other ball of wax.
That's a whole nother. I've already said I have an issue with the term truther, because they're usually not really telling the truth. They're just like hanging on to some false hope of a guy that's on their dynasty roster that someone needs to grab their shoulder and say it's time to let it go. I want to talk about Treylon Burks. He had a pretty interesting thread. So Burks over Ridley. Let's see if I could open the thread up here. As far as Burks, where would you rank Treylon Burks? Is he a top 24 dynasty receiver?
So it's funny that I've heard that this is the name that you start with. I have been talking about Treylon Burks with multiple different people, and I think if I were being really honest with myself, yeah, he probably is. I'm fortunate enough to do a podcast with the very smart, very intelligent, very brilliant, great hair Dwayne McFarland, and he does. Every time we talk about him, he lays out all the reasons why we should love Treylon Burks. I mean, the metrics are all there. The fact that there really is no significant target competition in Tennessee. There are so many things that line up well for Treylon Burks. And it's one of those things where you look at it analytically versus emotionally. Analytically, it is great. I won't say great, but very good for Treylon Burks. Emotionally, I look at it and I look at the Titans offense and I'm just like, and I just can't really get fired up about Treylon Burks. But again, like I said, if I'm being really honest and looking at it rationally and trying to take my own personal feelings about the Titans passing game out of it, then yeah, he probably is in Dynasty a top 24 receiver, a talented guy who's going to get a lot of targets, who is still very young. I think the only real concern is after this year, what does the quarterback position look like in Tennessee? Because one way or another, this is the last ride, I think, for Ryan Tannehill with the Tennessee Titans. Does that mean it's Will Levis? What does Will Levis look like? Could it be Malik Willis? Can he be better than he was last year? So those are sort of the questions to be answered. But in terms of opportunity and talent, Treylon Burks has a lot of it, and that should be enough to push him up that high.
Yeah, so some of the guys he beat in this thread: Christian Watson, Michael Pittman, Deebo Samuel, Jordan Addison, Jerry Jeudy. He was tied with Ayuk, ahead of McLaurin, Dotson, Jamo, Quentin Johnston, Marquise Brown, Pickens, Deontay. I mean, he essentially was a top 5, top 6 super flex.
People are way higher on Treylon Burks than I am. Like, I went through that whole little diatribe just trying to talk myself into it. It seems like the community really has locked in on Treylon Burks, like ahead of Michael Pittman.
Yeah, and so I do those dynasty price checks, and it's really interesting to see. And I do know you got to take all Twitter polls with a grain of salt, so it's not science. But I was very surprised, and I was like, man, I wish I had some Treylon Burks shares so I could trade them, because there's a lot of love on the streets.
Apparently, I was shocked. I mean, I sort of get Jordan Addison, even though I think Jordan Addison is going to be the top rookie receiver this year, just mostly because of the situation. I think it's sort of what it is. But again, I get it. Next year, who knows who the quarterback is in Minnesota, if it's going to be Kirk Cousins or if it's going to be somebody else. I mean, ahead of Michael Pittman, ahead of Brandon Ayuk in that 49er offense. I will tell you, just watching you scroll through that, I had to catch my breath a little bit. I was shocked.
Yeah. Same. And so that's why I wanted to bring that one up, and glad that I'm not crazy. So I wanted to talk to everybody about bird dogs. We got a special for everyone that's listening. Bird dogs makes you look good. Bird dogs got khaki shorts. They're designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look, not that boxed look, with the New Balances for those dads out there. Bird dog shorts does the same exact thing as Lululemon, but fits way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made to be stiff, restricting cotton. Bird dogs fix that issue with cloud knit fabric. They look just like khaki, but stretch. Got to get some Jim Harbaugh in these without having it sacrifice the movement. Bird dogs also is anti-stink wicking fabric. Keep you cool and dry all day. Go to birddogs.com/pool and enter the code POOL to get a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/pool for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise. So let's talk about these quarterbacks. And I actually put some on for Brad. So Brad, when you watch the show, let me know how I did, because I'm trying to put some guys you think and see if Marcus agrees or not. Marcus, you're the guest. Go first, Mr. Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson, I think, is just he's sort of. I know we're always trying to find the next big thing, right? And everybody who sort of missed on Justin Fields is now looking around for who can be this year's Justin Fields. And if there is anybody, it's probably Anthony Richardson. And in the sense of, look, just like Justin Fields, we have questions about Richardson as a passer, right? I think he'll be fine. He's not going to be great. There's going to be some flaws in that first year, but at the same time, the running ability will be there. And I think we're all sort of projecting that when it comes to rushing yards, I think most people are looking at like 800 yards as the baseline. So if he's getting you 800 to 900 yards on the ground, if he can get you 6 to 8 rushing touchdowns, then whatever you get from him as a passer, you just need him to not be terrible. You need him to not be just, bottom of the barrel passer. As long as he's competent, then you're looking at a guy who I think comes in here and really challenges to be a top 12 quarterback in his first year. And if he turns out to be a better passer than a lot of people anticipate, that number only goes up. So I think he's one of those guys where, especially in best ball drafts, I'm drafting him where I can as a second quarterback, just trying to get some shares of him everywhere. I've even done it in some regular mock drafts or some redraft leagues, taking him as a second quarterback, because I don't want to be the person who looks around and says at the end of the year, like, man, I really should have drafted Anthony Richardson. So I'm really kind of just taking those shots where I can in the hopes that it really does turn out to be the way we believe it can be.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about the Shane Steichen connection. Steichen did great job helping build up and throw that offense out there for the Eagles with Jalen Hurts and his development, and also Justin Herbert. There's not a lot of rookie breakout quarterbacks, but Justin Herbert is the one, and he did it with 5 rushing touchdowns. Also had almost 4,000 yards through the air. But he didn't rush. He only rushed for 230 yards. He didn't rush for 900 yards or something that we could see Anthony Richardson. But love the fit there. I picked Tua, and I know he's a little bit controversy as far as the breakout. Last year, he was having a good year, and he showed a little bit more upside than I think. I mean, I didn't know he had that in his bag, throwing 6 touchdowns. I mean, he had a monster week, and he somehow still was QB2 because Lamar Jackson went nuclear. But he scored like 56 points that week, and I just didn't know he had that. But when you got Jalen Waddle, when you have Tyreek Hill, you're going to be pretty good. And so I know the health concerns are there, but if you're talking about a guy with some serious upside, Tua's got the upside because of those weapons, potentially getting Dalvin Cook. They got Devin A-Chain. This defense got a lot better. I think it's going to be a fun team. And if he can stay healthy, I mean, he was a top 10 quarterback on a points per game basis last year. It just comes down to the health. Marcus, what are your thoughts on Tua?
Yeah, I think everything you said about Tua is right. I mean, when you've got that track team, I mean, literally a track team around him when
Crazy.
You talk about Hill and Waddle, and even in the backfield with A-Chain and Mostert and Jeff Wilson, there's so much speed on this offense, and it really is just a matter of him staying healthy. I mean, we all watched last year as he dealt with concussions, and it got kind of scary at some point to watch Tua. And I think that's always going to be, unfortunately, an issue. I think it's something that we're always going to be concerned about with him. But in terms of what he has around him, and having a guy like Mike McDaniel there helping coordinate that offense, I definitely would not be surprised if you see Tua end up. What is the ceiling? Top 8? Can he be? Do you think he can be a top 5 quarterback? But I think certainly a big year potentially is coming if he stays healthy.
And what are your thoughts on Kenny Pickett? I've seen him as a very popular pick as a breakout candidate. Not a whole lot of rushing upside, but he's got a pretty good situation there in Pittsburgh, and he's got a year of experience under his belt.
I appreciate the optimism on Kenny Pickett, and I'm not going to say he's going to be bad. I just don't know. I feel like what we saw from him last year was, it wasn't exciting. It wasn't very special. I'm not ready to write him off just yet, but I'm also not in enough to say that I think he breaks out this season. Now, he does have some pieces around him to help, right? I think Deontay Johnson's an outstanding receiver. Forget the fact that he scored 0 touchdowns last year. I think you got to kind of wipe that out. But having Deontay Johnson there, I know people are going to split on George Pickens. He's a human highlight reel, even if he's not consistent week to week. He can make big splash plays for you. Adding Allen Robinson, I know he wasn't great in Los Angeles last year, but he still brings a veteran presence who can get open and earn targets occasionally. Pat Freiermuth being there. There are a lot of weapons around Kenny Pickett. I just don't know how good he can be. So I guess that's a long way of saying I'm taking this year to really watch him, to reserve judgment and really watch Kenny Pickett. And if he breaks out, hey, I'll sit here and say, yeah, man, I missed on that one. But I'm just giving him kind of an incomplete grade at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, can he improve on last year? I mean, he absolutely is going to have to. Seven touchdowns, 9 interceptions isn't going to cut it. I do like the improvements on the offensive line. I do like, the weapons around him and a healthy Najee. But I do think he's one of those guys similar to like a Derek Carr, Andy Dalton. Like, that's his ceiling. And those guys were never really like top fantasy guys. Like, they weren't even like Kirk Cousins level of fantasy, because they didn't get the yardage and the turnovers. They hurt. If you get a bunch of turnovers, it can hurt. If Pickett struggles, will they go back to Trubisky with Allen Robinson?
I don't think Allen Robinson wants that.
No,
I don't think he wants that to happen.
No, I don't think so either. Well, I'm going to tell you guys about Underdog Fantasy. Then we're getting into the running backs. We're brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Best Ball Mania 4 is here. Underdog Fantasy is giving away $15 million in prizes. You heard Marcus talking about it earlier. Best Ball season is here. Underdog Pick'em is also, it's a great way to get down on your favorite MLB and college baseball player props. So many ways to win over Underdog, and active in so many states. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code SGPN. Let's talk about these running backs. We got 2 rookies on the board and an first-year starter with Alexander Madison. But let's start with Mr. Bijan. You asked me if this was too easy. Hasn't broke out yet.
He has not broke out yet, but I feel like everybody's expecting him to. I mean, it's not uncommon at this point to hear people say they think, the ceiling is RB1 overall. I mean, that's how big, that's how high people are on Bijan Robinson. And look, it makes sense, right? We always throw around the phrase generational talent to the point that it's sort of become a punchline. But you are talking about a guy who is an incredible prospect. Does everything. And he lands in one of the most run-heavy offenses in the league with a head coach in Arthur Smith who wants to run the football. And now they're, showing us mini camp videos of him lining up and running routes and catching passes. And we're all drooling over what it can be. And so, I feel like, if he does it, if he finishes outside the top 10 running backs, we will be incredibly disappointed. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he will finish as the RB1. I think there are other places in the offense to go. In fact, there's another guy in Atlanta that I have as a potential breakout guy. So I think a big season is coming for Bijan Robinson. I understand why you have to spend a first round pick on him in best ball leagues and in redraft leagues, because the opportunity, it's one of those things where opportunity meets talent, and everything seems to be pointing toward Bijan having a great season. I think you're looking at 250 touches or more. I think you're looking at, 1,400 or more scrimmage yards. I think you could be seeing double-digit touchdowns. I really do think there's a lot of goodness coming for Bijan Robinson this year.
Yeah, it's a great offensive line. They ran the ball the most, and they had the third most rushing yards last year. And this system has featured backs before, with Derrick Henry. So, sky's up. I know that we're probably all setting, the bar extremely high for Bijan, but this guy deserves it. And I don't think anyone would be surprised if he ended up being the RB1 overall. Alexander Mattison is a very interesting guy. He's younger than people think. I mean, he's been in the league for a long time, but he's still 25. He's the same age as Najee Harris, same age as Stetson Bennett. But Alexander Mattison, he's been that guy. He's been like the ultimate, like every time you draft Dalvin Cook, you have to get Alexander Mattison. And then he's come in and delivered. I mean, I think maybe one game he did not deliver, but on average, he's scoring 20 PPR points in his 8 games where he got, over 15 touches. Do I expect him to go be Dalvin Cook? No. Do I expect him to be a top 10 running back? No. But I do think he could be a borderline RB1 in this offense it's a very explosive offense, and with how they use the running back. And he also could be a 2-year starter based on the contract. But what are your thoughts, Marcus, on Alexander Mattison?
I think what works in Madison's favor is that traditionally the Vikings have been kind of a one-back offense in that, whoever the starter is, that's the guy that they roll with. Now, maybe that was because they just love Dalvin Cook that much and he was that productive. Maybe that doesn't really apply when it turns into Alexander Mattison. But I'm willing to kind of take that shot, especially where the ADP is. You're not really look, we're not talking about you getting him at the end of drafts, but you're also not having to spend, a first, second, third round pick to get an Alexander Mattison. So I think the opportunity cost is worth the chance you're taking on bringing a guy like that in. And again, I'm curious how they use him in the passing game. I mean, Dalvin Cook was a big part of catching the football there. Will they do the same thing with Alexander Mattison, or will they find another guy to catch passes on third down for them? But I do think the opportunity is there for Mattison to have a really good year. And you're right. If you drafted Dalvin Cook, you had to turn around and draft Alexander Mattison. I do think it's funny, though, that the moment Dalvin Cook was released in Minnesota, you saw a lot of tweets and a lot of takes about, hey, so now that he's gone, do we go out? Do we draft? Is it Ty Chandler? Is it Dwayne McBride? Everybody was already sort of looking for the guy behind the guy.
Looking for the zag.
Yeah, exactly. Looking for the guy behind the guy there, which sort of makes me laugh about this whole thing that we do.
You read my mind, because that's exactly what I was going to talk about. I mean, Dynasty, what's nice about his price is there is a lot of people that don't believe in him. Brad's one. And so they don't believe in him. And so they're going and looking to be the contrarian, which helps his price for those that do believe in him. So he's not to the point where you're buying him at his ceiling. But yeah, everybody's got a take. I've seen, Tony Pollard comparisons to Ngakwe or the one kick returner.
Nwangu, yeah.
Yeah, Nwangu. And then, Ty Chandler. And then Dwayne McBride, who's, he's more of a bruiser. He had very little rushing, passing upside. They got him in, I think, the 6th or 7th round. So, it's interesting to see how the Dynasty community works, where they always want to outsmart everybody else. And those of us that have been a fan of Madison for a while are just like, all right, finally, let's see what he's got. Going back to quarterbacks, just real quick. If you were to have to take one, would you take Sam Howell or Desmond Ridder?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I might take Sam Howell. I'm really thinking. I'm really thinking this through right now. I might take Sam Howell. I think Ritter's fine, but I do think you have to take into account that it is going to be a run-heavy offense. I think they're going to try to throw the ball a lot more in Washington, and I think Howell is going to be a guy who's going to be aggressive, push the ball downfield. They've got good wide receivers with McLaurin and Dotson. And I think I've said this before too. I think maybe I'm drinking a little bit of the Eric Bieniemy Kool-Aid, seeing what he can do potentially now that he's got his own shop to run there in Washington. So I think that for me pushes Howell slightly over the edge over Ridder.
Yeah, and with the running backs, there could be like 20 running backs on this breakout candidates. Would you rather Rachaad White or Dameon Pierce?
Pierce. I don't know. I just want nothing to do with the Bucks this year. And I know everybody keeps talking about, Leonard Fournette was bad and Rachaad White deserves the job. And I'm like, well, Rachaad White really wasn't much better, and the offensive line is terrible. I don't think either of these offenses is going to be great particularly. But I feel like I saw more out of Dameon Pierce last year than I saw out of Rachaad White. And like I said, I am generally kind of staying away from Bucks in drafts. Everything about that offense just makes me a little bit queasy.
Yeah, and let's go on to my last running back, and that is Jamir Gibbs. I gave that one to Brad. I play a majority of PPR leagues, at least half-point PPR. And so this guy is the way they're talking him up, and the fact that he went 12th overall and then immediately got rid of a very good running back in DeAndre Swift tells me that this guy's going to get the ball a lot. Do I think he gets, 25 touches a game? No, I don't think so. But I do think he's going to get the targets, and you don't really need 25 touches. Ramondre Stevenson averaged about 17 or 18 last year. We've seen Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler. They've had sub 200 carries pretty much their entire career, and they've been fantasy football studs. And so if this guy can get enough volume in the passing game, which I think he can, then the sky's the limit. He's another guy that could easily be a top, running back. And you talk about breakouts. There's not a lot of rookie quarterbacks that break out. It happens, but there's not a lot. If they do, they need the rushing upside like Anthony Richardson or Justin Herbert or Cam Newton, those guys. Running backs break out year one. I mean, these guys, they come into the league in their prime, and I think both of these guys could be top 12 in the league this year.
Yeah, no, I like Jamir Gibbs a lot. That offense is going to be amazing. I think they might even be more potent than they were last year. And, I think everybody is sort of kind of pegging it as, hey, Jamir Gibbs is going to step in and sort of be what DeAndre Swift was. David Montgomery steps into a little bit of the Jamal Williams role. Now, I don't think we can completely discount what David Montgomery can be. I know people sort of like to dump on him. I'm kind of a closet David Montgomery fan. So I don't think you can completely just discount him, because I think he's going to get a lot of short yardage goal line looks. And so that touchdown upside will certainly work in his behalf. But I do expect that we're going to see Jamir Gibbs catch a lot of passes. He's incredibly explosive, and I would not be surprised if we talk about him as kind of a high-end RB2 at some point late in the season.
Yeah, and I'm with you on Montgomery, who's still pretty young, but as soon as Gibbs got picked up, I had a lot of people in my inbox trying to trade for David Montgomery. That was a very valuable offense to have both running backs last year, but really the guy that is the goal line back. And I don't expect David Montgomery to have 17 touchdowns, but 10 touchdowns in that offense, behind that offensive line, is not out of the possibility. And, for him to get some, healthy work in the carries department, I think, I think that Montgomery could also be a back end, RB2.
Yeah, no, I think that's possible. Again, the touchdown upside sort of keeps him afloat, and he will grind out just enough yards to, have some value, I think, week to week.
And so this one we have one Jet, not two. Elijah Moore there is now on the Browns. Garrett Wilson, who I think probably some low hanging fruit, and then Drake London. So what's your thoughts on Drake London?
I think Drake London was pretty good last year, all things considered. I know we all were frustrated sort of by the passing game or the lack of a passing game in Atlanta, but I think when you step back and take a look at what London was able to accomplish, it was not a bad season. And I think when you especially put it in context of the fact that Marcus Mariota was incredibly inaccurate, then that makes it look a little bit better. So now they've made the switch to Ritter. And I think this is just me sort of believing that Ritter is going to be a more productive option than Mariota. Not enough for me to want to draft Desmond Ritter, but enough for me to want the pieces around him. I think it's the reason that we're all still sort of in, not all sort of in, that we're all still really in on Kyle Pitts. I just think, you're going to see some more quality targets. And so last year, all things considered, Drake London had 866 yards. He had 4 receiving touchdowns. He had 72 catches on 117 targets. I think if you have a more accurate quarterback, you see all those numbers go up. And again, there isn't a ton of target competition. You've got London, you've got Pitts, Bijan Robinson will sort of get some opportunities there, but it's really going to be those two guys getting a lot of work in the passing game. And so last year, look, admittedly, I'm a bit of a USC homer. I'm gonna root for those guys. This year, I said it's Jordan Addison who will be the top rookie receiver. Last year, I said it was Drake London. I believe it honestly, mostly because of their situations, and I think we're gonna start to see this year out of Drake London what I thought we would have seen last year.
Yeah, there's a lot of highlights last year, which were really kind of lowlights that you can show, like Marcus Mariota just spraying the ball over the field and being like we need to relax a little bit with the hate on Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And I'll be honest, some people are hating on Drake London. I mean, you throw out how he's productive at the end of the year last year. The first thing they're going to point out is Kyle Pitts wasn't healthy. And I'm like, yeah, but the guy was actually getting balls that he could catch, and he caught them. And
Did we do the same thing with Amon-Ra St. Brown, by the way?
Yes.
A couple years ago, we did the exact another USC receiver. This is the exact same thing with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Where at the end of the year, it's like, oh well, T.J. Hawkinson wasn't there, and DeAndre Swift was banged up, and this and that. And it's like it just carried over the next year. All of a sudden, St. Brown's great again, and we're like, oh, maybe he's just actually good at football. So maybe this is what it is. Maybe Drake London is actually just good at football, and the circumstances were such that it kind of allowed him to pick things up. But
I just think everything we saw earlier with Treylon Burks, why is Drake London not getting that kind of love? Like they're like, oh, Treylon Burks is the number one of a very stinky offense. Like you're the number one because the number two is really bad, and he's the number one here. And people are taking Treylon Burks over him and think he's going to break out. And I think it's, a little bit of, confirmation bias. But like everyone got on board, and then people like to kind of try to tear somebody down. But I do like London, and Ritter was just such a more accurate passer and just better decision maker in that offense. And that offense could get a better, quarterback here in the next year or two if Ritter doesn't work out. Garrett Wilson, again, I say this is low-hanging fruit, but last year this guy did a whole lot with not much. Yeah, Joe Flacco, Mike White, Zach Wilson. And he just went out and did it. And so, like, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and those guys have really kind of spoiled us, and our expectations are super high. And so we see 800 yards from a rookie receiver, and we're not impressed. We should be very impressed. This didn't happen, in 7 or 8 seasons ago. Like, it was very rare to see rookie receivers doing what these guys are doing. They're doing it early. Garrett Wilson and Drake London, they look like they belong. They look like alphas, and I can't wait to see Garrett Wilson with an upgraded quarterback. I know Rodgers is not the same, but I can't wait to see Garrett Wilson this year. What are your thoughts on him?
No, I mean, I think this is an easy one. Absolutely. That I think it speaks volumes that last year we were excited when Mike White was playing because it meant more opportunities for guys like Garrett Wilson, right? Like, again, not that we were like super high on Mike White. We didn't think he was going to suddenly, lead the Jets to glory, but we're like, man, it makes it better for his pass catchers that's how bad Zach Wilson was. And you're right. The Aaron Rodgers that they're getting in New York isn't exactly the same guy that we saw in Green Bay for all those years, but he's still better than anything the Jets have run out there over the last few years. The last thing I'll say about it is never knock low-hanging fruit. I always say low-hanging fruit, it tastes as good as a fruit at the top of the tree, and you don't have to work as hard to get it, so it's all good.
I love that. And so, with Garrett Wilson, I love the fact that, these route running savants and these guys like Jordan Addison, who's a very good route runner, they do well for fantasy football early, and honestly better than these big athletes, the size and speed guys. And you see that. And so when you're looking at wide receiver breakouts, they typically don't happen year one. It's usually year 2 or 3. The majority of them happen. They are guys that do work in the slot. You see guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Cooper Kupp, the guys that, Justin Jefferson, that really produce early are not just on the outside. They're working in the slot. They're doing different things. In college football, a lot of these guys are playing in the slot. Part of that is, you're putting your best guy against their third or fourth, best corner. You're also moving him around so they can't get their hands on him and stop him at the line of scrimmage. Sometimes that does hurt the receiver's development because they don't really know how to develop that. But in the NFL, if you let them do the same thing, then they go out and ball out. And we've seen it with a lot of these young receivers. CeeDee Lamb's another one, Jalen Waddle. These guys are just studs right off the bat.
I completely agree. Absolutely agree.
Elijah Moore. And so this one I put on there, Brad has to have one homer take every episode. And so he's a Browns fan. And I'll just say this was a pretty good receiver class. And they took pick 52 or 42, actually, pick 42 that was used in the Aaron Rodgers trade to get Elijah Moore when there was good receivers on the board. Jaden Reed, Marvin Mims, that was in the, the territory of, Jonathan Mingo and those other guys. For me, that tells me that they have plans for Elijah Moore. And I think he fits right in there in the slot. As long as DeAndre Hopkins doesn't go over there, he could be the number 2. And DeSean Watson, we had Michael LaFlorio on the show, friend of Marcus, and he talked about last year, I know we didn't see Watson like we had in the past. Obviously, he had a lot of stuff going on in his personal life. That's all, that's all there. He's also transitioning into a new offense, a new team. But the reason he didn't run the ball, they probably told him not to. There was no reason for him to put himself in harm's way. We should see a better, I don't know if it's the same DeSean Watson in the past, but a better DeSean Watson, and Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore should be his top targets.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how I feel about the Browns, right? Is that they will go as DeSean Watson goes, and I struggled to believe he will be as bad as he was last year. I think it was a lot of things. It was the long layoff that he had. It had been a long time since he'd played a live NFL football game. It was, the pressures of everything, everything that was happening away from the field and all the legal struggles that he went through. It was also the pressures, I'm sure, of trying to live up to that contract. That was a big part of the conversation was how the Browns are going to, how they could justify giving that player that much money and have it all be guaranteed. So there were a lot of things I think that were contributing to DeSean Watson looking as awful as he did last year. I think he's going to be better. It's like I haven't drafted Elijah Moore in as many places as I would like, but I do take some shots at Amari Cooper, and I think you're going to see a Browns passing game that excels a little more this year. And the rumor is they may be more of a pass-heavy team than they have been in the past. That you've gone all in on DeSean Watson. You want to see what you've got. They're putting weapons around him, so I can get down with Elijah Moore really stepping forward in a big way this year.
Yeah, they used pretty high draft capital on receivers. They didn't have a first round pick, and then they went and took their first pick was Elijah Moore, and then they got Cedric Tillman after that. And so already have Donovan Peoples-Jones on the roster. You have Amari Cooper on the roster, who they got as a steal with those 3rd and 5th draft picks or whatever they got for him. Just a question on two guys, Christian Watson and Jerry Jeudy. A lot of those guys, they're popular breakout candidates. Thoughts on those two?
Um, I think I'm a little bit more on the side of Watson than Judy, but I do see a scenario where both of those guys can break out this year. I think what we saw from Watson was very encouraging. He was a big run after the catch guy, and I think that's going to hold him in good stead. We're also waiting to see exactly what Jordan Love is going to be, but I do think that there's going to be an opportunity for Watson to continue to get targets. I think he's going to be the number one target again because I don't know where else they're going to go with the football consistently. Romeo Doubs was nice at the start of the season and fell off. Jaden Reed is a rookie. There's really nobody else there that's going to command a lot of targets. As for Judy, I think he can really turn into something. I think so much of his situation is going to depend on can Russ cook or is Russ cooked? I think that's the big question that we're all trying to answer right now. And I think Sean Payton will find ways to get Judy the football. So I could see that happening as well. But if you're going to ask me which one I'm going to take, I'm probably going to take Watson ahead of him.
Good to know. Good to know. I got some Watson shares. And the tight ends to finish it up. You have Mr. Chig on here, and let's talk about him.
Yeah, no, Chig Okeke looked really good last year. I know that the sample size was fairly limited at the end of the season, but he played very well. In terms of being able to get targets, he had 46 targets over a fairly limited sample size, turned that into 450 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think you see those numbers increase as he gets more playing time. And I talked earlier about Treylon Burks really being the main target there. There's not a lot of competition. Chig Okeke is going to be the guy who I think sees a lot of those opportunities. I just don't know where else they go with the football. Does Tyjae Spears, the rookie, get some opportunities as a third down back? Do they try and integrate Derrick Henry even more into the passing game? I don't really know, but I do think Chig Okeke is in line for a pretty nice year. And I say this, I think you've got your top 8 tight ends. You can put them pretty much in any order. After, say, the top 8, maybe 9 guys at the position, there's probably about 15 different tight ends that you could pull their names out of a hat in nearly any order, and it would be hard to really argue with them. But I do think, if I'm stacking them, I would tend to put Okeke higher to the higher part of that list of 15, that group of 15, if you will, than more toward the bottom.
Yeah, and that's pretty in line with, I did a dynasty price check for him, and he was going a little higher than I thought. He was right around an early second-round pick. They had him, I think it was tight end 14 or 15. A lot of the metrics really do point to this guy breaking out. When you're looking at some of these breakout tight ends, you're looking for guys that are good yards after the catch, getting some good air yards, and they're top 3 on their team in targets. And so it's very likely that he could see up to 1,000 air yards if he stays healthy and get 60 to 70, maybe 80 targets in this offense where there's really nothing behind Treylon Burks. It's Nick Westbrook-Akine and then Kyle Phillips, unless they somehow landed DeAndre Hopkins, who has kind of changed his tune. He said he was all about wanted a ring, wanted a stable management and a good quarterback. And then he went over and visited the Titans. And so none of those things were, really checking the box. But we'll see. I brought Dalton Kincaid, and, I talked earlier about there's very rarely a rookie breakout. Really the only rookie breakout we've had in recent times was Kyle Pitts. He was tight end 6. He had 1,000 yards, and that's pretty dang good for a tight end. I know it wasn't good enough because everyone expected him to have 2,020 touchdowns and was mad at him. I mean, the kid was like 19, 20 years old during his rookie season. But I look at the Bills roster, and we were just going through Mike Clay's projections and just kind of diving in and seeing what he's thinking. And I was like, man, this Bills roster is not as good as I thought it was. You got Stephon Diggs. The second is Gabriel Davis, and then you have Khalil Shakir, and then you have Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. You have James Cook out of the backfield. I think it's a team that needs DeAndre Hopkins, but if they don't, I could see Dalton Kincaid being a second or third option on this team. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. And he's a guy that I have loved drafting in best ball, taking shots at him. And again, not to bring everything back to USC, but I'm going to bring this back to USC. Watching him last year against the Trojans in the regular season, I remember at one point watching the game and texting with my my old roommates and stuff and being like, I don't think it's fair that Utah gets to play Travis Kelce against us, because he went absolutely nuts in that game. But that was sort of a microcosm of what his season was. And I think you're going to see the Bills use more 2 tight end sets. I think you'll probably see Kincaid sort of line up as a big slot receiver, and they will try to use him there and get him involved. So I can see him being kind of one of those rare rookie breakout tight ends. So I absolutely love that. And you're right. You break down that pass catcher group, and it's kind of Stephon Diggs and everybody else. And, I think it's easy to paper over that in the regular season when you've got Josh Allen, running over people, scoring rushing touchdowns. You got Stephon Diggs doing really big things. But I think you've seen it come out in the playoffs late in the season when defenses say, okay, well, we're just going to take Stephon Diggs away. We're going to double him, and we're going to make you go somewhere else with the football. And the Bills haven't really had an answer for that. So, I don't know if Kincaid all by himself is the answer, but I do think he does add one more weapon to what is already a pretty potent offense.
Yeah, as much as I love Diggs, I mean, he was pretty inconsistent at the end of the season last year. And part of it was just because, like you said, defenses they took him all out of the game plan. And that's part of the reason he's frustrated, and part of the reason that they're having some issues with Diggs over there in Buffalo. The last guy on the board, and I'm sure that you probably, just like everybody else, is a little sick of the Irv Smith breakout. But is this finally going to happen for Irv Smith?
I don't know. I mean, I have been very much, I was for a while on the hashtag let Irv swerve train, just trying to make it happen. I really want it to happen. I don't think Cincinnati's the place it happens, just because there are so many targets are available, or so many places to go with targets, I should say. And I don't know that there are enough to go around for Irv Smith to be super productive, right? When you look at it and you know that Jamar Chase is going to occupy a lot of them, and you got to feed T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd is not a bad receiver, right? If he were anywhere else, he would be certainly a number 2 receiver, maybe even on a bad team, a number 1 receiver. Not a bad player, but he's the 3rd option right now in the passing game in Cincinnati. And that's before, you've got to get targets to Joe Mixon or whoever they're going to throw the ball out of the backfield. I just don't see enough opportunity for Irv Smith to break out. I would love it, because I have been one of those people who's been waiting for this breakout moment to happen. I just don't think that even in that offense that scores as much as it does with a quarterback like Joe Burrow, I still don't think there's enough targets for Irv Smith to break out this year. I want to be wrong, but I don't feel like I am.
Yeah, and I think, obviously anything, just playing 15 games would be a breakout for Irv. But, I think the optimism that you're seeing, because a lot of Irv Smith's is ADP is rising. It's not like expensive, but it's rising. And a lot of people see what Hayden Hurst did last year, where he was basically like 8 or 9 fantasy points every single week. And he ended up as, I believe it was, tight end 13 or 14 on the season, just because he played a full 17 games and had, moderate production every week. Well, anybody we missed, Marcus?
I will say that I'll give you the other name that I had mentioned to you as a potential breakout running back, and that was Cam Akers. And I know it was on again, off again last year with him and Sean McVay, and it seemed like for a long time the Rams were really doing their best to try to be rid of him, and he just kept coming back, because no matter what the Rams did, they grudgingly realized that he was their best option in the backfield. And I think now they've sort of leaned into it. And, look, training camp reports are always to be sort of looked at critically and skeptically, but Sean McVay has really done his best to talk up Cam Akers, saying he's really bought in and he's going to be a leader and he's going to be a central figure in this offense. And you look at that depth chart behind him. I mean, right now, Kyron Williams, I think, is listed as the number 2 running back. They just went out and signed Sony Michel, but that seems more like kind of an insurance piece, maybe a camp body to sort of have there. In fact, last year they tried Kyron Williams over Cam Akers. They tried to start him and give him more snaps, and in both of those games, Akers still outperformed him. So I think they really are sort of in there. I also think the other part of this is maybe we see more targets for Cam Akers. I don't think they're going to be necessarily designed targets or planned targets, but you've got an aging, sort of beat up, immobile Matthew Stafford behind an offensive line that's not going to be particularly great. Could be a lot of panic targets going in the direction of Cam Akers if the protection starts to break down. From our perspective, I don't care if they're planned or not planned, but if they're targets and he catches the football, that still works out in our favor. So I do think that Cam Akers can step up and do something really good this year.
And he's still young. I know the Achilles injury is, that's usually a kind of a death sentence for running backs. And he played really well. He's a good running back behind a really bad offensive line last year. And everything's baked into his cost. And so, yeah, I find myself, okay, like this guy's been punished enough. Throw him on my team. Like nobody wants him.
By the way, apparently it's his birthday today. So happy birthday, Cam Akers.
Happy birthday, Cam Akers. That's a nice little nugget. Wait, he's 24?
Turned 24 today, yeah.
He's still younger than Najee Harris, and he's been in the league like 4 years. All right. Well, hey, Marcus, I really appreciate your time, and I hope to see you at the expo.
I will be there. Well, once I stop procrastinating, I have a hotel booked. I have tickets to the expo. I just got to, get off my butt and book a plane ticket. But I am intending to be there yet again this year. I had a great time last year.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it again. You're always so gracious with your time. Everybody, make sure you give Marcus a follow. As always, good luck this season.